Sherm has kept us on our toes this week and has brought in a very important topic. I think that when we're considering things such as active shooter incidents or other safety concerns in the workplace, many aren't quite aware what they need to do or how to do it. And it's really important for all business owners to understand that they do have a general duty to provide a safe working environment for their employees. And so there's many things that we can do and many things that the article touches on in terms of compliance and liability. But what I'd really like to talk about is what different steps we can take in the workplace to make sure we're prepared for these different things, what potential trainings that might be appropriate, policy and procedure, and maybe some specific examples of what processes should be put into place.
I recognize that this is a very sensitive topic, and to that end, it is still important to talk about because as we work with small businesses every day, Brittleigh, I'm sure that you see that part of the work that we do is helping take a business from a place where they may not have processes in place to where they have solid and established processes. And so when it comes to that duty that you mentioned about keeping your team members safe, it is a very real obligation. And in terms of this article and the reference to mass shootings specifically, there is an issue regarding the responsibility being raised for third-party liability, and that's where an individual who has suffered some sort of illness or injury as a result of an event sues the business for causing alleged harm. And in some of these cases, there actually have been actions that these companies could have taken in advance. And as you mentioned, they have a duty to do something to prevent it. And so, no business is the same. But Brittleigh, I wanted to talk about just some of the examples of things that businesses might want to be thinking about and real situations of things that they can or should be doing as it relates to keeping their team members safe.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what businesses might want to be thinking about first here. One thing that would be important is in an office, do you have a secure barrier to prevent unauthorized individuals from gaining access to the building? So, is there some sort of secretary or reception area where someone's coming in to check in? Do we know who's in the building, how long they're there, or better yet, when they exit? I think one example as to why we would need to do that, that might be outside of the realm of having someone come in that might commit a crime, but even when we're thinking about things of such as fires and acts of God, and if we would have to evacuate for any purpose, knowing who is inside the building is so important. And oftentimes that little detail is overlooked. Maybe we don't know who's in the building because it's a guest and we don't have that check-in or that barrier. And so again, this first idea, this first topic of checking in barriers for an unauthorized or authorized guest covers many areas of concern, be it from an active shooter coming in the building or something maybe domestic, but also fire, acts of God, and other issues that we should be concerned. So again, that barrier of gaining access is the first thing that we really need to consider to cover so many other topics.
Yes, I would say there's a ton to talk about there. And some of the ways that I see this playing out in some businesses on kind of things that I'm seeing happen that shouldn't be happening, but also things that companies are doing to improve their security. Side doors being left open, doors to stairs where, individuals, if they wanted to, could access the building. It's really important that companies are able to secure their workplace. And so when you were talking a little bit about, having a barrier, that's really important. So if, just any old person could walk into your office and have full access to, the entire workforce, that, in my opinion, is a definite gap. And the company is not meeting their duty for keeping those team members safe. So it's definitely something to be thinking about. In a lot of companies, they use the little key fobs, and I think those one, help with keeping the building secure, but it also creates that log that you were talking about, Brittleigh, to know exactly who is and isn't in the building. So it kind of checks off two things at one time. One of the items that I wanted to chat about, I've seen actually a couple of times in my career, and it is in regards to current practices with maybe receiving calls or just inquiries about, hey, is an employee, like, is Summer at work today? Like, can I talk to Summer? Like, and the reception says, or whoever answers the call, no, she's not here today, or she's here, but she's on another call. So while that may seem really innocent on the surface, you've just given information to whomever is calling that they can or cannot find a specific individual at work. So that may seem very innocent, but I want you to imagine that in the event of stalking, domestic abuse, restraining orders, and any sort of threat, you've just provided information that could be potentially putting an employee at danger. And so the best practice is to not answer those questions whatsoever. Take a message, send it to email, but never share whether an individual is or is not at work under any circumstances. Brittleigh, what are your thoughts?
I agree entirely. I also want to add, I think that, some people may say, well, but what if it was my husband who I text every day when I get to work that I've gotten to work and he calls and asks if I'm there? Well, I think there are some workarounds to who has access to that information. And we can get that information when you're onboarding. So, although we want to be secure and know who we can and can't give information to, we can always ask in onboarding, who's your emergency contact? Who is somebody that we're able to release information to? Should somebody call for you? But we'll want to make sure that we're always vetting that person when they call. So the best practice is truly just to not answer those questions. But if you have a particular need where somebody maybe has somebody who calls in more often, have that discussion one on one with your particular employee, and you can handle that from there.
I agree. And ultimately, it is about keeping your team members safe. So even if you have to tell somebody who may have received this information in the past, or that it's a relative, that you have a policy to keep your team members safe, while they may be frustrated, they should certainly see the underlying reason of why that practice needs to exist. So Brittleigh, I wanted to get your thoughts on, you talked a little bit about training and needing to have your staff trained for these types of events. And so can you share with our listeners what type of training would be important? And if they're not doing it, how urgent is it for them to put on their, on their list of things to do?
Absolutely. So, first, to start with urgency, because as a business owner, you do have that general duty to provide a safe environment. I'd say it's pretty urgent. This should be something that you should put on your next agenda to talk with leadership and begin to build out these plans. Specifically, what plans? Well, basically, any and all that we can think of. So, from a fire drill to if you have tornadoes in your region or maybe hurricanes, active shooter, domestic violence situation, all the way down to even just if you have clients that visit your office, a disgruntled client. So, those happen too, and that can escalate very quickly. And if your team members don't know what to do when somebody maybe becomes first verbally, but potentially even physically aggressive when they're upset, those all need to be handled, put into those training procedures. And then I say best practices to train at least annually. And some of these can be hands-on training where maybe you're evacuating the building. You're actually doing a drill. So I know that might feel like we're back in elementary school, but we all knew where we were supposed to go all the way back then, and that's important. And so as adults, we need to know where are we going in these particular events, because if we don't know where to go, we can't count the people, and then it comes all the way back to accountability. And it's the accountability of the business. It's the duty of the business to make sure that they know where their people are, that they were properly trained to know where to go, so that they can continue to make sure that they know who's there and who may still be involved in a violent or potentially hazardous situation such as a fire.
And I would say over the years of working in the office, I've actually encountered a wide variety of evacuations, from an actual fire in the building to a fire on the hillside, to what ended up being a fake bomb threat. And fortunately, we did not experience any sort of active shooter situation, but the company I worked for at the time was committed to providing that training to the staff in the office. And part of that training actually educated the team on, where do they go? How do they position themselves? At what point do they exit? Do they try to negotiate or not negotiate? Where's the safe meeting point? Like all of the things that when you are in that type of situation, you don't want to have to be trying to figure out what's right or wrong. And I think going through that experience really opened my eyes to things like making sure that individuals don't have access to the main building, and that there are secure business practices like locking the door and a log of the team members that are within the building. So, really great topic. I know that there's a lot to manage from a business standpoint, but keeping your employees safe is indeed the most important thing a company can do.